I'll admit, whenever I'm trying to name or place every country in the world on a Sporkle quiz, my Achilles heel is always the Pacific Islands. That's nothing against them in particular. I've just always found it easier to know that this shape is Belgium and this one is Burkina Faso than to know that this particular cluster of islands is Tuvalu. So, because I've always found the best way for me to learn something is to force myself to teach others about it, and because of how often this region is just left out of everything, I'm going to give you all a brief, basic overview of the Pacific Islands. This video is brought to you by Warhammer 40,000 Tacticus. This is Oceania, the one continent that is distinctly not a continent. But then again, continents are really more categories than actual geographic areas. Oceania comprises the various islands of the Pacific, more specifically those significantly into the Pacific. So, not including places like Japan or Taiwan or the Philippines, which tend to have much more in common with the rest of Asia. Probably the best way to get to know Oceania is to divide it among its three cultural regions: Polynesia, Melanesia, and Micronesia. Polynesia is by far the largest and, often incorrectly, used interchangeably with Oceania as a whole. But that's like calling all of Northern Europe Sweden, or all of Asia China, or all of Spain Spain. To find Polynesia, the best way is to find Hawaii, the northernmost of these islands, New Zealand, the big one down here next to Australia, and Easter Island, which is this lonely little island nowadays under Chilean jurisdiction, which means it must be pretty far to the east. Draw a line between those three and you got a triangle that forms Polynesia, also known as the Polynesian Triangle. Within the Polynesian Triangle, there are a few sovereign island nations, namely Tuvalu, Samoa, and Tonga, as well as a lot of islands under New Zealand, American, or even French jurisdiction. The Cook Islands and Niue are associated states under the realm of New Zealand, while Tokelau is considered a dependent territory. What this means is that they are essentially their own independent nations, but who rely on New Zealand to do all the international heavy lifting. Forming the northern angle of the triangle is the US state of Hawaii, recognizable by its large size and its northernness. However, in Polynesia, the US also holds its own part of Samoa, specifically American Samoa. The US also has a bunch of other territories in the Pacific, but they're in the other regions, which we'll get to in a bit. Finally, all these various archipelagos strewn throughout the middle of the triangle form the imaginatively named French Polynesia, home to the various holiday islands of Bora Bora and Tahiti. Yes, Tahiti is its own thing within French Polynesia, not just another name for the territory as a whole, but, Holland approach. It truly is amazing how far the Polynesians were able to spread, sailing across the empty Pacific to find even the smallest of islands and atolls, all the while avoiding horrific storms, resource shortages, and battling the ever-present Necrons. Okay, maybe there weren't Necrons to fight in the Pacific, but there are Necrons to fight in Warhammer 40,000 Tacticus. Oh, wait, hang on, I forgot to do the sponsor static I always do. Okay, there we go, that's better. Warhammer 40,000 Tacticus, a turn-based strategy game set in the eternal battle of the Warhammer 40,000 verse, where new players and grizzled veterans of the franchise alike can bring the universe's most powerful warriors to lightning-fast skirmishes, where strategy and tactics matter just as much as strength and brawn, all in single-player, PvP, PvE, and much more. In these battles, you can even choose whether to fight against other players or join forces and fight alongside your fellow humans. It's not hard to see why Tacticus has a 4.8 star rating on the App Store. After all, the developers are constantly introducing new exciting features, game modes, and challenging events to the game, assemble and duke out more than 80 legendary champions from 18 playable factions, and make use of their unique strengths and tactical possibilities as you bring your troops to battle and sweep the galaxy clear of all resistance. If you want to get a head start, click on the link below or scan the QR code on screen to get an extra 2,000 gold and 50 blackstones. But act fast, as this offer ends the 1st of February 2025. That settles Polynesia. Now for the two smaller regions, which ironically have more independent countries. Next, let's go to Melanesia, starting from the easternmost point, which is this hurricane-looking archipelago that people know as Fiji. Going west, you may notice something of a line stretching all the way through to mainland Southeast Asia, starting with the island of New Caledonia. New Caledonia falls under French jurisdiction, but in a very arm's-length sort of way, or I guess more like a planet's length, as the island tends to handle a lot of its own affairs. Just north of this long archipelago known as Vanuatu, and a short skip over, is another slightly longer archipelago called the Solomon Islands. This island, however, is not part of the Solomon Islands, but part of Papua New Guinea. If you've heard of Bougainville and the independence referendum passed in 2019, this is that island, which may or may not become an independent nation in 2027, though Papua New Guinea was never actually bound to honor the referendum, so we'll see where that goes. Finally, we anchor in with Papua New Guinea itself, part of the wider island of New Guinea, with Indonesia holding the western half. The rest of Indonesia, however, doesn't really count for this though, as everywhere west of any one of these lines, no one can really decide, is considered part of Asia rather than Oceania. If this seems like an incredibly arbitrary division, that's because it is. Well, actually, jokes aside, what these lines do show are the rough divisions between the Indo-Malayan and Australasian bioregions. That is to say, what kinds of plants and animals exist on either side. Though if you want to learn more about the biogeographical realms of the world, I'd recommend Atlas Pro's recent videos. Skipping Australia because we all know where that is, lastly we head north to Micronesia. Not the nation, but the region. But also the nation. The Federated States of Micronesia itself, though, is actually divided into 4 distinct and distant states: Yap, Chuuk, Ponape, and Kosrae. To the east of Micronesia, the nation, but still in the region of Micronesia, are the Marshall Islands, and to the east of that is the equally disparate Kiribati, who you might recognize from that one video about weird time zones made by insert educational YouTuber here. Similar to Micronesia, Kiribati is divided between 3 archipelagos: the Gilbert Islands, from which the country actually gets its name, but filtered through Gilbertese phonotactics, the Phoenix Islands, and the Line Islands, the latter 2 known for operating on the time zones UTC+13 and UTC+14, moving the international date line dramatically east, making these islands' populations the first people to see the new year. Going back west, past tiny little Nauru, we find Palau, only 900 kilometers from the Philippines, and the US territories of Guam and the Northern Mariana Islands. This is also where you find the Mariana Trench, this long scar along the ocean floor, which at this point, known as Challenger Deep, plunges deeper than any other point in the Earth's crust. Despite the sheer size of the Pacific, most of these peoples all share a common ancestry. Or at least a common language family, which granted isn't always the same thing, in the form of the Austronesian languages, a massive language family including everything from Hawaiian to Maori to Indonesian to Madagascar's Malagasy. Yeah, these people really got around. Within the area generally recognized as Oceania, the only real exceptions to this pan-Austronesian rule are the many Australian Aboriginal language families and the 60 different language families spoken across New Guinea. That's not 60 languages, by the way, that's 60 language families. You know, like Austronesian or Indo-European. 60 of those, on this one island. I mean, to be fair, when a place is inhabited by humans for 50,000 years, at least, that sort of tends to happen. So hopefully this video gave you a good idea of where everything is in Oceania and a decent overview of this often ignored region of the world. Thanks again to Warhammer 40,000 Tacticus for supporting the channel. Once again, be sure to check them out in the links below.